Hello, my non-college educated friends. Welcome back to Shop Talk, where I talk today about compressors.
This video is brought to you by Yellow Jacket.
Now, we talk about diagnosing compressors. A lot of people jump the gun with this sort of thing because they want to sell that compressor or a new system. They got the fever to get that money and make their lives great. But sometimes we get the fever too hard and we miss some of the common things that are making a compressor look like it's failed, yet it's not failed. So what kind of things make a compressor look like it's failed when it actually hasn't? Well, the simplest is the capacitor. If you miss the capacitor, though, that's willful negligence, or just you don't know what you're doing. Capacitors go bad, compressor can't start, get the buzz, and then you get the overheating a lot of times where it's offline for a few hours, which is another thing that people can mistake. If a compressor is out on thermal overload, if it's not cooled like with your garden hose or your Subco magnetic dealy or whatever, then it could be out on thermal overload for hours, especially on a nice hot summer day. So if you go in there and you say, well, the capacitor is bad, you change the capacitor and the compressor still doesn't start, then what you have there is just a thermal overload potentially. You cool it down, you can check for thermal overload between the common winding and the other windings with a multimeter. But if you bypass that or don't know that you can do that, then you might think the compressor is bad, especially when you say it's been 30 minutes, it's still offline, we're going to call this thing and sell a new system. You might be mistaken about that. Another thing is burnt wiring. What I've noticed in my years and years of HVAC service is that plenty of wires get burnt. It's not rare, in fact it's pretty common. I see it on heat strips, a lot of high load items like the compressors, bigger systems. It'll burn some wires off. It don't mean it's the end of the world. Sometimes the wire connection just gets loose. If it's on the terminal of the compressor and it burns off, damaging the terminal, you might be out the compressor. But a lot of times there'll be a wire burned off, or maybe it's shorted out on a piece of copper, rubbing up against copper. Make sure that you have checked all those wirings and make sure they're good to the compressor, and make sure they're not good to ground, because sometimes they'll rub up against the ground or something that goes to ground, like your chassis of your unit or your copper piping, and then it'll make it seem like there's a ground. And the bad thing is when the system goes offline, it may no longer be rubbing up against it. It may just sit there away from it where it doesn't show it's grounded. So you got to make sure that you check the system thoroughly and make sure all the wiring is good. And that's not just with the multimeter, because you might have to visually check it, because like I said, just because a wire grounds out against something doesn't mean it's still going to be leaning up against it whenever you test it next. Now, a lot of times it will be, but that doesn't mean it will be. That's unfortunate, because it'll be a little bit of a brain teaser trying to figure out where the issue is. It just becomes a time game looking through there and just knowing you want to check everything, make sure it's good, because you don't want to look like a horse's ass at the end of the whole deal. Just like your regular capacitor, if you have a hard start or start circuit, a lot of compressors come with a start circuit, especially reciprocating compressors. And if it's not working, or if the relay and or capacitor is bad, then you might have to replace that instead of your compressor. Sometimes those things just go bad. Start capacitors, whenever the relay goes bad, maybe that start capacitor stays in the circuit too long. Start capacitors aren't meant to be in a circuit very long. They're not built to keep cool. They're built to work for just a second and then get out of the way. So if they're in there for more than a few seconds, they're going to overheat and they're probably going to bust. You see these capacitors that you have run capacitors for, they're filled with oil. Now, star capacitors aren't like that. If you open them up, they're not filled with oil, because they're not concerned with cooling, because they're not supposed to be in a circuit very long. So if they are, then they get trashed pretty daggone quick. So make sure that those capacitors are good. Not just that there are star components, make sure those star components are actually doing something in the circuit by testing them. Last but not least, make sure that your outdoor fan motor is working properly and that your coils are clean. Coils can look cleaner but not be cleaner. So you can take deltas across the coil to see where they're at, as in entrance air and then exit air through the top, typically the top, sometimes it's the side. Make sure that everything looks normal. And I can't tell you what normal is in every circumstance. That's something experience and data will have to tell you. Also, make sure that if there are components inside that cycle the fans or reduce the speed of the fans, make sure they're working properly. You have your ICM products that ramp a fan down if you have cooling in colder weather, or maybe they shut the fans off at a certain pressure, refrigerant pressure. Make sure all those things are working properly, because if they keep that fan off too long, or that fan runs too slowly, And fans can run too slowly as well. That's a whole nother story right there. Fans can fail and run slower than they're supposed to. Just making sure that you're kind of watching out, because you know what a fan looks like that's running at the proper speed, 825, 1175. You know what a fan looks like and sounds like at that speed. So if something sounds too slow, it's not getting that cool air across the unit, then maybe that's going to cause your compressor to want to take a dump on you, which is a scientific term. Compressor wants to take a dump on you, and you don't want that to happen. So make sure to check those things as well. Hope this video has been helpful, guys, and I'll see you all on the next one. God bless all of you.
Save 8% off your order at TruTechTools.com by using the Shop Talk discount code.